The conference room fell silent as Chen watched another $1 billion slip through his fingers. The Japanese investors stood, bowing politely, their translator conspicuously absent for the third day in a row. Marcus's hands trembled as he tried to salvage the deal with broken phrases from a translation app. But the damage was done. As the heavy doors closed behind them, he slumped into his leather chair, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that suddenly felt hollow. He had built an empire on communication, on connecting people across continents. Yet here he stood, voiceless, powerless, and utterly alone. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. His telecommunications company had made him a billionaire by the age of 35, bridging distances and breaking down barriers across the globe. Yet in the past 72 hours, he'd hemorrhaged nearly $3 billion because he couldn't communicate with the one group of investors who could save his flagship project. His regular interpreter, David, had suffered a stroke. The backup had quit without notice, and every agency in the city was booked solid during the International Tech Summit. Marcus loosened his tie and stared out at the San Francisco skyline. The Golden Gate Bridge gleamed in the afternoon sun, a monument to human achievement and connection. He'd always believed that success was about being the smartest person in the room, making the right calls, surrounding yourself with the best talent money could buy. But what happened when money couldn't buy what you needed? A gentle knock interrupted his spiral. "Mr. Chen? Would you like me to bring you some tea?" He turned to see Rosa Martinez standing in the doorway, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her kind eyes filled with concern. Rosa had been cleaning his office building for nearly a decade, though he'd barely noticed her before this week. Since David's stroke, she'd been the one constant, quietly tidying up after his disastrous meetings, offering small comforts he didn't know he needed. "Thank you, Rosa, but I'm fine," he said, though his voice cracked on the last word. She didn't leave. Instead, she set down her cleaning cart and stepped into his office, something she'd never done before. "Mr. Chen, forgive me for speaking out of turn, but I overheard what happened with the Japanese investors." Marcus managed a bitter laugh. "I'm sure the whole building heard. It's probably all over the financial news by now." "I speak Japanese," Rosa said quietly. The words hung in the air like a lifeline thrown across a chasm. Marcus stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "You... what?" "I speak Japanese, fluently. I lived in Tokyo for 15 years before coming to America. My late husband was Japanese." Marcus felt his heart pounding. "Rosa, why didn't you say something before?" She smiled gently, her weathered hands clasped in front of her. "You never asked, Mr. Chen. And why would you? I'm just the cleaning lady." The shame hit him like a physical blow. How many times had he passed her in the hallway without really seeing her? How many conversations had happened around her as if she were invisible? He'd prided himself on building a company that valued innovation and talent. Yet he'd been blind to the person who'd been right in front of him all along. "The investors are leaving for Tokyo tomorrow morning," Marcus said, hope and desperation mingling in his voice. "Rosa, I know this is far outside your job description, but could you possibly help me? I'll pay you whatever you ask." Rosa shook her head, and Marcus's heart sank until she spoke again. "I don't want your money, Mr. Chen, but I'll help you because it's the right thing to do. Because I see a man who's finally ready to listen instead of just talk." That evening, Marcus found himself doing something he'd never done before, sitting in the break room with Rosa, drinking coffee from the vending machine and actually listening. She told him about her life in Japan, about teaching English at a small school in Osaka, about the husband she'd lost to cancer and the daughter she'd raised alone. She'd come to America for a fresh start, but found that her credentials didn't transfer, her experience didn't matter, and opportunities were scarce for a widow in her 50s without connections. "I took the cleaning job because it was what was available," she explained. "And it's honest work. I'm not ashamed of it. But yes, there were days when I felt invisible." Marcus thought about all the meetings he'd held, the deals he'd struck, the praise he'd received for his business acumen. None of it had prepared him for this moment of reckoning, understanding that he'd been successful while being fundamentally disconnected from the humanity around him. The next morning, Marcus did something else he'd never done. He asked Rosa what she needed to succeed. Together, they prepared for the meeting, Not with him dictating terms, but with them collaborating as equals. Rosa explained the nuances of Japanese business culture, the importance of relationship building, the subtle hierarchies in language, the value placed on humility and respect. You've been approaching this like a transaction, Rosa told him gently. But to them, business is personal. It's about trust, about knowing who you are as a person, not just what you can deliver on a spreadsheet. When the investors arrived, Marcus having convinced them to give him one final chance, they were surprised to see Rosa sitting beside him. But as she greeted them in flawless Japanese, her warmth and genuine respect evident in every word, something in the room shifted. This wasn't just translation. It was bridge building. Marcus watched in amazement as Rosa navigated. Conversations he'd never understood were happening. She didn't just translate words. She translated intentions, cultural context, unspoken concerns. When the lead investor expressed reservations about Marcus's youth, Rosa didn't just relay the words. She helped Marcus understand that the concern wasn't about his age, but about wanting to see evidence of wisdom and long-term thinking. The meeting stretched for hours. There were moments of tension, of difficult negotiations, but through it all, Rosa remained steady. She challenged Marcus when he fell into old patterns, encouraged him when he showed genuine understanding, and helped him see his own company through new eyes. When the lead investor finally smiled and extended his hand, Marcus knew they'd done more than save a deal. They'd built something real. In the weeks that followed, Marcus restructured his company in ways that shocked the business world. He created a new position, Chief Cultural Officer, and offered it to Rosa at a salary that reflected her true value. But more than that, he implemented programs to ensure that every employee, regardless of their role, was seen and heard. The janitors, the cafeteria workers, the security guards all had seats at quarterly meetings. All had channels to share insights and ideas. The Japanese deal went through bigger and better than originally planned. The investors cited the integrity and humanity of Marcus's organization as key factors. Financial analysts were baffled by his unorthodox approach, but the results spoke for themselves. One evening, 6 months later, Marcus found Rosa in her new corner office, reviewing cultural briefings for an expansion into Southeast Asia. He knocked on her open door, and she looked up with that same kind smile. "I've been thinking about that day you stepped forward," Marcus said. "You didn't have to help me. I'd never acknowledged you, never saw you as anything more than part of the furniture." "Why did you do it?" Rosa set down her papers and looked at him thoughtfully. "Because I saw someone who was lost and needed help. That's what we do as human beings. We help each other. And perhaps I also saw that you were finally ready to learn what real wealth means." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. "I thought I'd built an empire, but all I'd really built were walls. And now?" Rosa asked. "Now I'm learning to build bridges. Thanks to you." As he left her office, Marcus realized that the billions he'd nearly lost were nothing compared to what he'd gained. Rosa hadn't just saved his company, she'd saved him from a life of successful isolation, from the poverty of spirit that comes from seeing people as functions rather than as fellow human beings. The cleaning cart still sat in the hallway outside Rosa's old supply closet, a reminder kept intentionally. Some of the executives had suggested removing it, but Rosa insisted it stay. "So we never forget," she'd said, "that every person we pass has a story, has value, has something to teach us if we're humble enough to listen." And Marcus Chen, billionaire, finally understood what it meant to be truly rich.